here. I'm sharing a lot of new songs with you because I have 2 new records out, and it's been a long time since I've released anything, and it's been really good to get all this music off my chest and to share it with you as a gift, and it's been really fun to play. Some of the new music sort of ventures into some kind of new territory for me, and that I decided, especially with the full-length album, The Age of Us, I decided for a lot of the songs to do away with kind of a former conventional methodology by discarding the song structure, discarding sort of like the basic concepts of melody, accompaniment, narrative, conceptual kind of shaping, and kind of doing away with sort of all my sort of comfortable platforms, because I really wanted to try something new, and I felt like really bored with myself and my voice and my whole approach, which is kind of unfortunate, but also kind of a normal, familiar cycle to go through, year after year as you write music. And for me, I thought I wanted to get to the barest necessities, the fundamentals, the basics, and so I just started out with a lot of this music. I just started out with sound, and I just had a lot of equipment, like synthesizers and pedals and software and computers, and wasn't even starting out with instruments, and wasn't even thinking of it as music at all, but just as sound sculpting. And this went on forever. This went on for many years. I was kind of working like this, and just creating a sort of catalog of soundscapes that had no shape and no meaning, and I felt like, in some ways, it felt very cosmic, because it was ever expanding, like the universe, and ever evolving into this sort of this black hole, a vacuum. And although I was having fun and in this process, I wasn't ever achieving anything. I wasn't accomplishing anything. There was no result, which was kind of terrifying. And in the midst of that, I just happened upon some work by the folk outsider artist Royal Robertson. And I don't know if you know much about him, but a lot of this music is sort of referencing this artist and using him as an allusion and as a companion, because he sort of helps me gather together all this sort of raw material from the cosmos and bring it back into myself, into my body, and into sort of this song structure. Royal was a black American sign painter and folk artist, eccentric man, a prophet, a minister, a soothsayer, and a father of 12 children, and a husband to his beautiful wife, Adele. And he was from Baldwin, Louisiana. And he lived in this little house that he made with his own hands, and he covered it with signs, and he painted signs for the local community, for the police cars, and for the ice cream trucks, and for the local clubs. He was a sign painter, but in his spare time he painted, he did drawings, his own art. And at first his art was very decorative. He drew angels, and he drew these love letters to his wife Adele, and he did sort of these pastoral landscapes of a new heavens and a new earth, and of his house and his life there. But he also had this sort of the gift of prophecy, and he would have out-of-body experiences and visions from God and angels and spaceships and aliens, and these beings from other planets and other worlds would visit him in dreams or in real life, and then he would go into sort of a psychosis, and then he would paint the images that he saw, and they were basically he was preoccupied with outer space, space travel, time travel, hurricanes, tornadoes, the apocalypse. But he was also really inspired by sci-fi movies and comic books and girly magazines, and so he had all these really bizarre influences. And also he read The Inquirer, and he was really into astrology. astrology and the occult, but he was also a Southern Baptist, and he read the Bible every day, and he could quote from the Bible just as quickly as he could, quote from like the Tibetan Book of the Dead. He was a very self-taught man. He was uneducated in a lot of ways, but he had a lot of knowledge, a lot of psychic knowledge. But as he got older, it became clear to his wife, Adele, that his gift was sort of ushering him into insanity, and that he would have these outbreaks of madness where he would become kind of disoriented and aggressive and violent. And eventually she took him to the doctor, and he was diagnosed with schizophrenia, and he had delusions of grandeur, and he had hypochondria, and they tried to medicate him, but it made him feel really sluggish and sick and weird, so he wouldn't take his medicines. And he got sicker and sicker, and eventually he became very antisocial and started to believe that the FBI and the CIA were after him and were always at his door. So if the mailman came by to deliver the mail, he thought that it was like the government coming to take him away or take his children away. And then the next day he started to believe that his own children were aliens or were bastard children from other men. And he started to accuse his wife Adele of cheating on him. And he basically receded into this insane sort of fantasy state of mind, and his wife and his children had to leave. And so Royal was left alone for the last few decades of his life in his house, and he had no friends, and he really didn't have much help outside of a few art collectors who found out about him and would come visit him and give him food and money and art supplies. And Royal, what he did is he completely forgot about the real world and lived in his imaginary world of spaceships and space travel and utopia and the apocalypse. And he covered his house in signs, and he created within his home all these little shrines to these mythological creatures that he had created. And he was extremely poor and extremely unwell, and he died in 1997. I think he had this sort of massive sort of heart attack in the midst of a psychotic vision when he was running around in his yard. So he died in poverty, and it wasn't until a few years later that some artists started to go through his house and they found all this work, and they started trying to save it, to salvage it, because the elements and the weather were damaging it. And so there's actually several hundred, maybe a few thousand of his paintings and drawings that are still around. And they're all really, really kind of gruesome and fantastic and pretty vast in their depictions of his visions and his imagination. And as I was working on this material, I found in all of this stuff a kind of, as crazy and exotic and psychotic as it was, I found it a very comfortable place to live, to reside in, and somehow it allowed me to sort of work through and contextualize a lot of this material. And it allowed me to see a relationship between the imagination, the vastness of that, and the cosmos, and the body, the physical body, the personal side of things, and the interior self, and touch and sensation all somehow began to relate to my own fantasy world and my imagination. And I began to see sort of correlations between those two things. And so I feel indebted to Royal for helping me kind of through all of that stuff, and just because he's been a kind of a companion through all this. And so that's kind of a sort of a long discursive dissertation of sorts, but that's also an introduction to the song I wrote about him, which is coming up next. And we're using a lot of Royal's imagery. If you hadn't connected it yet, a lot of this sort of the spacecraft and the architectural renderings and planets and all that. All those are from Royal's paintings, and the song is for him. It's called it's It's my reality check song. It's called Get Real, Get Right.